that their centers have made so-called on-the-moon structure, but the moon database stream already know runs through Federation, other than through the higher terrestrials. Now, what they are stating is the actual space elevators that can extend from one perimeter to the other, from this planetary grid to the next. And what scientists have not told humans is that Earth is actually closer to the moon in solar status than what they are representing. And because of that, these elevators would exist. Because if it was a lot further on diagnosis streams, they won't be able to exist because they have to polarize at such a magnetic altitude, it will be able to hyper-emulate between one extension period to the other. So these space elevators, what they are stating, could actually become better without a line, a physical line, being from one end to the other. And that would have to include the anti-gravity star pod units itself.
Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome. Blue, how are you?
I'm good today, Mike.
I know we got a really big show today. We got a lot to talk about. Episode 10 here. Congratulations. What are we going to talk about on episode 10?
Well, the first one is the cause wave effect that can be announced is the time redux format, what that initializes about. Under the proper authorities between technologies and understanding the replications that when announced beforehand and that are coming into another timeline again, such as the quantum med beds, such as semi-psionic technologies that deal with magnetism and polarity spheres through building structures as well. It is a timeline skip and an ultimatum that were injunctured through higher terrestrials. And it happens to the portrayals of the facts of the military in conjunction in between stasis many times before, and it's happened, it's going to happen again into that micropolarity wavelength.
All right. Sounds like we got a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it. Tell me more about this connection here with the military and the extraterrestrials. Is that a real thing?
Yes, and understanding the foundations that some have think of an unequalized terminology of a certain foundation itself of military with these ETs on bad substandard technologies. Informality and reduction, if you think about it, look into certain movies and equalization, they will, and like in turn say that there are two different leeway points, or some transaction that could end up good and the other bad. Well, it's going into that type of formality. Now, not all ETs are bad, as we all know. And some are working through some militaries, and some are working through some other types of militaries. And the ones working through the good types of militaries are in conjunction, obviously, through Air Force and Space Force and certain preliminaries of NASA itself, SpaceX, etc., Area 51. Others inoculated through the deeper persecution of a negative interval and run through other types of militaries in conjunction, like for instance, Biden's leeway cause of the draconian interface on a negative interval, which does not need to be happening. So thinking about there's two different conjunctures going on with two different types of technologies too. Those hold on negative leeway bad technologies, obviously including the biogenetic labs and the shots and everything, and the other types of stuff they're messing and polarizing between humans, trying to make a man into a woman, that type of stuff, that's screwed up. Other things doing genetically with kid structures like CRISPR, for instance, you don't want them genetically mess with that. Is what I'm saying is you got to remove the negative military parts of it. You got to remove the negative conjunctures because there are two polarized timelines. And then one on the positive frequency needs to be allotted here because this is going too far into the negative.
Now, I've been convinced for years that we've had some sort of extraterrestrial, alien life form, what have you, participation in our humanity here. Basically, you look at the technology, the advancements in technologies just over the last 100 years, okay, the past 50 years, even the past 10 years, you see the timeline keeps getting shorter and shorter with these amazing advancements. And I know that a lot of these technologies are first introduced through the military or NASA or what have you. The internet, for instance, they say was created by the military initially. So, I don't believe that we could evolve so quickly in such a short amount of time to be able to accomplish these great tasks. You take the trip they say we made to the moon, and that happened with less technology than I have here on this cell phone here. So it's just amazing to me that we're still buying into these things. Are we saying that, in fact, those things are real? That is how things happen. That is how we've gotten advances in technology. Is that really a thing? Am I imagining this, or is this a real thing?
Yeah, some like certain types, like the phones and the infrastructure. Remember how we have polarized another show about those things, how a negative impacts could play if you not put the right types in to that planetary grid. That's what I'm stating. You want the right types of military infrastructure. You want the ones that work through Space Force and inoculated codes that would put in a quantum med bed or a polarized event through a better quantum technology, not something that would ultimately downsize a planet. They have to understand that medicinals as well, and putting something and shooting it into your body or just intaking it. You have no idea what's in that shit. Why not go to the natural medicinals and infrastructure that can be a better scanning module for the mainframe itself?
So that comes to my next thing here about the med beds. I think I heard you mention it before. We'd mentioned it on previous shows. We've seen this in futuristic movies like The Fifth Element, etc. But we've also seen technologies like cell phones and communicating via your watch, like on Star Trek back in the 60s. Is it possible these things have always existed? We're new to seeing these things.
All right, the phones will ultimately become obsolete because the wristbands are actually one of the Federation's technologies, or a similar node that's already been behind the scenes being made in polarity to help in the quantum financial system and the frequency communication outlet itself, which will go to another communication standard. And it's a lot better for mankind than sitting there and staring at a damn screen 24/7. And if you think about these movies, same inoculation. Okay, you could talk to somebody for a second. I'll do that for a minute. At least I'm seeing them polarizing that on that wavelength through a hollow mainframe. And so, you want to get sucked into all this negative intervals, especially all news, all this other stuff that's online that doesn't need to be. It dumbs you down.
Is it possible? Is it possible that, much like information is being released today on a smaller scale than what we're talking about here, I'm talking about government-wise here in the United States, is it possible that, like the med beds, like the cellular technology, they have to drip those things out? In 1920 or whenever, they couldn't just come out with this first calf out of the chute. People would have lost their minds. Their minds would have been blown. Same thing with the release or the disclosure of extraterrestrials and our communication and their presence here on our planet. You can't just come out of the box with that. You have to release photos and videos of sightings. You have to slowly come around to it. So my question is where does it end? Where does it stop? We're just going to keep evolving to places that even me with an open mind, that my head would explode if they announced it all today. What's the end game here? Is it to take our consciousness to another level, or what's the end game?
Well, the inoculated end game would be this: to an effect of hyper managing the neural standard, the wavelengths of mankind to their DNA genetics again, and being able to have more advanced systematic bodies like they once were. Because then if you read the old word, how humans have inoculated a 400 to 600 year lifespan, and did not have degenerative diseases at one time. Timelines and skip in a conjuncture will come about for that again. So it pretty much is an advancement of a 1,000-year curricular scale of moving forward in a better generation.
Now, I've seen and I've heard I've seen in movies or the idea, and you brought it to my attention here about space elevators and NASA and tell me more about this.
All right. It was also information I have seen and looked up on Interval too, but adding to the fact that we already know to the Federation that their centers have made so-called on-the-moon structure, but the moon database stream already know runs through Federation. Now, what they are stating is the actual space elevators that can extend from one perimeter to the other, from this planetary grid to the next. And what scientists have not told humans is that Earth is actually closer to the moon in solar status than what they are representing. And because of that, these elevators would exist. Because if it was a lot further on diagnosis streams, they won't be able to exist because they have to polarize at such a magnetic altitude, it will be able to hyper-emulate between one extension period to the other. So these space elevators, what they are stating, could actually become better without a line, a physical line, being from one end to the other. And that would have to include the anti-gravity star pod units itself, or similar to that mode of transportation, that would actually polarize one ingrading point to the next instantaneously on a higher elevation speed. It runs through an energetically line platform in a proposition between two systems on an energetic and electromagnetic frequency outlet. And the data streams itself, if NASA can polarize this right within the next few years, we are hoping in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll be able to retract a systematic polarity line between two data streams. So humans will be able to go from one place to another. It's one way to a movement speed so they can elevate. It's a far higher extension of an elevator than one that's in a building itself. Wow. And it can also, if they get that right, there will be underwater extensions seen too.
That just blows my mind. I mean, I can imagine what the people first thought when they first saw the concept of an elevator that would literally take you from floor 1 to floor 2 or floor 1 to floor 10 or what have you. People would say, wow, this is incredible. Well, that's how I feel about this information here with the space elevators. It's hard for me to comprehend it. I would almost have to get in one and physically experience it or physically see it. Is there a possibility that we're going to see something like this soon, or that this will become dripped out somehow, or is this something that's happening now? Is this something that the public will be made aware of in 10 years, in 20 years, in 1 year? What do you think?
This is something physically NASA has been working on for a few years now, but they have things they have to work on with the technologies, and they currently assist with the Kennedy Space Centers and other types of inquisitive affairs, especially SpaceX. It's another form of being able to transport from one generative node to another. All I know is the current technologies that they have been replicating, if all goes right, should be inoculated within that time frame. It might not be exactly on the interval, because they have to obviously diagnose a preliminary skill to see how it goes with humans first before it can be upper streamed. So diagnosing hopefully within the next few years, like I said.
Yeah, they don't want to just take volunteers right away on the first launch. They don't want to say, okay.
Yep. Right? Like, for instance, like SpaceX, recently they just launched people up into space without a person there and generated. They posted about that on the news and whatnot. So, I mean, that's just one extension. There's a hint there that it's moving forward. Things are moving forward on a space standard.
And that's a big step, because we've just heard not long ago about automated motor vehicles here that drive themselves, they would function like taxis and so forth. And these are physical things that are happening now in an experimental phase, if you would. Like, they're not, it's not a national launch by any means, but at the same time, I don't know if I would trust one of those right now. And these people got into a craft that took them off the planet, sent them around the planet, and then brought them back, and they weren't driving, they weren't pushing a button, they weren't even trained on how to do these things because there was nothing they could do anyway. It was all automated. Is that where we're going to be with these space elevators? Is that what's going to happen here, where I'm going to be able to, hey, you know what? We're going to go to the moon next Tuesday. Is that all right, hon? Tuesday we show up, we get in the elevator and we go. Is that what we're saying here?
There's just like a main transportation system. But in inlimatory skills, individual-wise, which may come a little farther away, would be the anti-gravity individual starpod units. And those, I had stated before, remember, run on the neurological pathways and integrated points of mankind. So systematically, it runs through your neural pathways. But this is different because it only goes from one point to the other. It doesn't go anywhere else. So there's two differences there.
And it brings to mind that, I keep bringing up that, people's minds will be blown if they see this technology. And there's certain technology that even I can't get my head fully around. I'm open to it, but I'm trying to put my head fully around it. And then it takes me back, because we know through ancient artifacts and ancient findings and the pyramids and so forth that we've been visited and there's been alien presence or extraterrestrials interaction with humanity, and they've actually visited before what we know as humanity. But it must have been crazy for people like the Indians, for instance, to witness things or see things or come connected. What do you think? What do you think their thoughts were when they first encountered people? Did they think they were gods, do you think?
In the ancient Native Americans, Indians, and the Star People is what they called it. Now, back in 2021, one had an interview through a tribe, through a certain network. And the interview studied and further analyzed what they had correlated outward. Now, the indigenous people don't say everything. They don't expose all their secrets. It's obvious. We all know that. They keep their secrets, but when time comes and you correlate what needs to be extended, it must. And there must have been one of them times that they say, hey, we just need to analyze and say this outward so people understand you're messing with the life forces on this planet. Now, when you mess with the life forces on this planet, you're messing with the star indigenous people, and the star gods, the gods that represented them were the extraterrestrials. We're talking about Bigfoot had to do with a scenario that were brought down, but also beings that represented and looked humanoid, like you all, for instance. And the stasis is where they're Anunnaki, they were dealings with the Pleiadian structure, Nordic, or some other type of leeway point. And they have communicated, they have given these people, these Native Americans, these different lines of effect through the cosmos. So they understand what that meant, what the different systematic points of effect meant in the cosmos, the constellations. They got all that information. They got a lot of that information diagnosed in the Alta stream up above. And it does go through the man societies as well. There were closer civilizations to that had help from the higher beings or so-called star gods, because those were helped with the calendars and the timeline reductive notes. But going back to the ancient Native Americans, is they not only gave them the knowing and knowledge of things, they gave them the knowing and knowledge of life itself. The music that they portrayed, and if you listen to some of that music, it's so beautiful. Like the Lakotas, the Madas, the Topalas, or the Lakotas, the Hopi, and the Crean. Those three, the Lakotas, the Hopi, and the Crean, they had visitations. They had an induction wavelength in between them and the higher representation codes. And they had taught him the forces of life and being in an equality with nature and the animals here, and being able to have respect for the doctrine planet itself. They were taught that from the higher beings. Just because higher beings or ETs are advanced, that doesn't mean that they're not stupid, that they wouldn't congregate something on a formality will to teach others to bring balance into the planet. That is one thing humans have got to understand, is they're not getting that balance right now. And they are formalizing more advancement than they should with the other parts of it. And that includes the planet itself, the elements, the creatures, and themselves. You cannot put something into replication unless you understand the ways of life itself.
So that was like the basis of a foundation for the extraterrestrials to communicate with us and advance us, because obviously without the innovations that the white man had brought, say what you will about the slaughter or the movement or the takeover or the stealing of the land or whatever you want to call it. I get it. Here's where I'm going to get questioned on this, and I might as well go ahead and confront it now. If the American Indians or indigenous people that we know of in this area had these communications with extraterrestrials, why didn't the extraterrestrials help them from being overtaken by the white people, the Europeans and so forth? Why didn't they intercede? Why didn't they help these people?
Inoculated takeover at that time did not give them the doctrine to make an effect. And that includes, if you think about another replicated timelines throughout the ages, how things have been demolished from their own society and pulled away. And they were pretty much pushed away because other advancements from other ages being brought here have deducted the ways of life and pretty much pushed away the foundation of life itself. They're putting in too much negative things upon it, and it caused them to move away from that timeline from juncture. What can they do? They respected nature and they respected the planet. But when you take away that respect, it pushes them away. It's the same thing like mermaids, and the same thing like I said, the paradox affects the Sasquatch and other beings, unicorns, whatnot. Not going to hang around humanity. You're not going to be around that type of infrastructure if it's going to either push them away or polarize its own negative effect. You got to learn to respect the doctrine of each individual and what they pull and what they put into, and understand the real allegations for that causeway. Now, this country did not belong to blacks, and it did not belong to whites. It belonged to the Native Americans and the beings that represented a higher planetary realm. And if you think about it, if you go even deeper, this country represented the whole entire planet at one time. It was one planet. Things got screwed up and lies got sorted out.
Are you saying that, you brought in Sasquatch and mermaid, and obviously the American Indians didn't travel, or so we don't think, across the oceans? My question is did Sasquatch and the American Indians coexist on friendly terms? Did they know each other? Did they respect each other? Did they not know of each other? Is that what we're saying here?
I said on another show about the Sasquatch and Native American Indians. Yes, they communicated, they coexisted at one time. Now, I'm sure there are still tribes out there of Native Americans that still have that secret, and they're still seeing these beings in communication. You can telepathically communicate. Anybody can, but only if the Sasquatch let you. They have that ability. Now, that will never be lost because that was a formality code of a divine nature between two sectors at one time. And if people think, and there are other things as well, it will not be lost. It can be scattered, but it's not lost. And Native Americans do exist on other countries across the planet. Like I said, it used to be conjoined. the formality code of the planet itself used to be on one ingrading point. There have been many proofs of that.
Interesting. Awesome stuff. And with your position with both the Federation and the Space Force, is there a short update you can give us? Maybe something on either side?
Yes. The inoculated effects that are caused by HARP are being currently caused by them on the substructure across this realm. There are database strains being lowered on the module effect, and it has clouded the elemental biowaves. So recently, in stasis, Space Force and certain other linings of effect are helping to remove inertial background bad conjuncture waves and polarize a good wavelength instead. So what I'm saying is we're dealing with a lot of biomechanical elemental waves that are not being generated good on this planet. So in that, the database strains of the good side are working hard towards refining these elementals out of equation.
And how about a final word for us? Do you have a final word for us today?
Yes, I do. Those two, what they understand, keep going forward to that equation. And those who do not understand what is going on, maintain your higher calibration code and learn that your principle of effect was maintained at a better species. Humans are a better species and they're advanced species. So they need to learn to accept that gift given from Source itself and move forward through it. Awakening in a higher expansion code with it will induct you to transactory to this next stage. And if others cannot polarize that, they've pretty much initialized themselves to dumb down. And humans are not made as Neanderthals. They are made as an advance of what even the indigenous people would have said, we are all part alien. It is truth. Y'all have that DNA in you linger to inoculate it better if everyone wants to maintain things at a higher scale.
Well, again, I appreciate you. This has been episode 10. That's huge. And we couldn't do it without the people watching, without the people listening. So please, wherever you get your podcast or videos, make sure you go ahead and subscribe and hit the notifications so you're aware when we're, updating and uploading more information. Blue, thank you again. Great stuff as usual. And I look forward to next time.
You as well, Mike. Have a good day.
All right.